The Quinfall is a game. It's a game that exists, but it's far from enough game to ever make me consider playing it again after this. There also just happens to be this very real concern that it seems like they're essentially reselling, potentially, bought assets from the Unity store. I'm so fucking bored. I'm just bored. I'm just bored. Like, I'm just bored. I don't know how else to explain it. Okay, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. I can't with this anymore. I just can't with this game anymore. I can't. And it is certainly not a living and breathing world. When I say the Quinfall is a game, I mean it is a game with systems, at least some shared server space, pretty graphics, and stuff. So much stuff, just system upon system. But I'm honestly left wondering why. Why do I care about it? Any of it? Why do I care about the combat that looks flashy, but is actually insanely boring? Why do I care about these vast open fields and trees and leaves falling from them that look really good, but end at that point? Why do I care about making a home in this space at all? Like I said, the Quinfall is a game that exists. And honestly, that might be more than I expected for this, because I didn't really think it was a game that existed. So I guess by that, it is better than expected. But you have to put that in context, because when I say this game is better than expected, it was because I was expecting this game to be the day before. I was expecting this game to have nothing when you logged in, to be constantly just a shell of what they've said, and to some extent it is, but it also has some positives that I'll try to talk about here, to try and, at least if you're interested in this game, give some kind of balanced opinion on it. But yeah, the game works, the systems work, and even though that's a low bar, it is a thing that exists. It is something you can go and play. The finer points, like if it's fun, if there's balance in the game, if the actual systems are worthwhile, well, that's more up for debate. But one thing for me that I want to get into before we even get into the positives, which I will say some, and the negatives, which I'll say some, this game, what I felt after playing this game the most, it has no soul. And that sounds very artsy, but when you think of the fact that games are an art form, the fact that the game does not have a soul, that it doesn't seem to have guidance, that doesn't seem to have a reason for existing other than just to throw all of these systems together and potentially take your money with an in-game store, it's something to consider. Let's talk about it and see if you agree with me or disagree with me. It took me 78 minutes of playtime on Steam, but I was able to finally create a character in the Quinfall without an error on the European server after countless failed attempts on US servers. The character creator is interesting, it's got a lot of options, and you can really design your own character, but I have no idea why. Like, I don't know, you can either just be a human, you can be an elf, you can be whatever this thing is that I made, but there's nothing really there. There's no information on what this game is, what the world is, any of that. That does not exist. It's just essentially a character creator. It's one of those things where even after this strange, nonsensical story, complete with AI images that brings you into the game, I don't know why I'm here. There's no explanation for who I am, or why I have holes in my body or not, what class I would be or why, given that it's a classless system. I didn't have high hopes, but here I am. Hello, I hope you're doing well and enjoying yourself in the Quinfall. My name is... I don't fucking know because I don't seem to have a purpose in this world, but I do have a bee, so there's that. I may look a little bit like a purple golf ball, but I have this stunning mustache, which makes up for all of it, and this is my little bee friend, Bee. Thank you for joining me on this adventure into the Quinfall. As I entered into this world, I'm kind of surprised to find that the game does actually exist, that there's NPCs walking around, that everything kind of feels and looks like an MMO. There's questing, there's an ongoing tutorial, there's vendors, it exists. And thankfully we have so much guidance in this game, because how else would I know to go 2 feet in front of my face? Because otherwise I would have no idea. You know, I'm very, very thankful with how much hand-holding exists in this game. It doesn't get much better. There's constant quest icons everywhere later on. At least there's no circles later. And the first thing I decided to do was to ignore the tutorial and go find some combat, because I really wanted to see how the combat felt in this game. And that was when I found this little section of NPCs that were just waiting to be slaughtered. When I say waiting to be slaughtered, I quite literally mean they were standing around waiting and did not actually attack me. They just let me murder them over and over and over again. And this is where I first found that the combat was a bit boring, and it just gets worse from here, in all honesty. But I wanted to try out some of the other things, because this is a game about a lot of systems, lots of different things you can do. It even has fishing. And so I wanted to go try that. That was part of my quest. I wanted to see what exactly is this fishing like. Well, it's actually kind of interesting. You can, you put your line out, you have a little timer, and then you end up in this little mini game where you have to try and catch the fish. Or if you don't want to do that, because you don't actually like playing games and you like them to play themselves, well, you can auto fish. So you don't have to do it. You can just leave it on and auto fish. And you can even say what rarity you want to keep. You can filter out what you don't want to keep. Yeah. But I wanted to go find some combat with a bit more difficulty. So I kept searching, and this is when I found that they have kind of a tiered combat system, where you have essentially NPCs that are no challenge at all, and then NPCs that are a bit more challenging with their little tiered system, their champion system. And so I was able to find that, well, they do a little bit more damage and they take more time to kill, but they're not exactly difficult. They're just the same thing, just with more HP and hit harder. But I also have pretty much unlimited amounts of potions, and so dying in this game so far basically feels like it's on me. But as I'm running around and doing things, I get this weird little pop-up, and I don't actually know what it's about because I didn't queue for anything. Seems like this is a worldwide thing that was popping up, telling me that I can go join an arena. As someone who absolutely adores arenas and battlegrounds in World of Warcraft, and in fact, I have subscribed to World of Warcraft just to go play those types of PvP because I like structured PvP, I was excited until you get into the PvP. 3 people, three opposing sides, and it seemed to be random levels. And one of the things that you see very quickly is that this game is not balanced around PvP. Just watch how long this takes. Was in this arena through the whole duration of it. I died several times because I was a melee and I was like, I think 5 and 8 levels below everyone else, the other 2 that were in this, but I just tried to watch them because nothing happens. They just sit around shooting things at each other and no one dies. You see, this arena lasted 10 minutes. And in that 10 minutes, I died 3 times by basically feeding myself as kills to the people in the arena. They did not kill each other once in that time frame. They just kept healing themselves and not dying. This would have been a 10-minute arena with no kills if I wasn't terrible. Trying to find something that was a bit more satisfying than that PvP, I wanted to engage in another system they have, taming. So I went out and tried to tame things. We'll talk about it more in the positives, but this little bit of taming, even if the way that you tame is a little bit bland and it's just the same, it's exactly the same system as with fishing. It's just like press the button at this time. It's still, I like that they had it. I like that they had taming. I like that I was able to tame a cow that I would then be able to place in my home. That was pretty cool. That was a fun thing. And the sheep too, and the horse. Taming a horse. I tamed myself a new mount. That was pretty cool, I'll admit. The last thing I really wanted to try for this first impressions was a dungeon. And of course, they have a dungeon finder and solo dungeons. So I hopped into a solo dungeon to see what it was like. I was pleasantly surprised that they had difficulty settings, so I went ahead and tried the normal setting. This is actually one of the things I wish more MMOs did, give difficulty options and scale the awards. It's something many ARPGs do, and I actually think MMOs could benefit from it to give players either the challenge they want or the simplicity. Open world MMOs, especially those that push social connections, this won't work as well. Like, I wouldn't go and suggest this for Pantheon. But if the game is going to have instances, do this. And if your game's baseline is incredibly easy NPCs in the open world, like World of Warcraft or Lord of the Rings Online, offer a harder version. In fact, Lord of the Rings Online actually does do this. I think it's one of the coolest things they've done. They tried it first with the Legendary server, and it's one of the coolest things that I think that they have done. And World of Warcraft, I think, is getting there. They're going towards that a little bit. It would be nice to have the open world actually have some difficulty instead of just two-shotting things in World of Warcraft. Getting into the dungeon, it looks like they will get treasure chests and there's buffs and NPCs. At least these NPCs mill about a little bit and they'll actually attack you. But even on normal, it still feels, well, incredibly boring. Just holding down a mouse button and occasionally using skills. But even the skills aren't always necessary, as demonstrated here when I swapped over to the starter healing staff where I had no skills and simply held down my mouse button. But hey, at least I was getting awesome loot from these treasure chests. There were 8 of them in the dungeon. Just listen to my excitement when I opened the second treasure chest after getting a brand new breastplate in the first chest. Oh. Okay, I'm already, I got a second upgrade for my chest piece in the same dungeon. All this crafting stuff, scrolls. And now my inventory's full again. pure unbridled joy. Really felt like I earned it with that incredible dungeon run so far, getting 2 upgrades to my breastplate in the same zone, and the upgrades just kept coming over and over and over and over again. Continuing to run around the dungeon, it's essentially the exact same enemies over and over again, the exact same corridors. Everything is just the same. It's like the worst version of an ARPG. And while I'm sure there are better dungeons to play at higher levels, this dungeon experience quite literally made me so frustrated and so damn bored, I rage quit the game even after a multi-hour queue because I just couldn't stomach this anymore. Like, I really tried to play this game. I know there are some people that are actually enjoying the game, and I'm happy for them that they are enjoying themselves. I was more frustrated playing this than any game I've played in recent memory. I've played Throne and Liberty. I didn't really like the game, but I found a lot of really good positives in the game. I enjoyed that game infinitely more than this. I've played over 200 hours in New World and had infinitely more fun in that game than this game. The kind of games that also reel you in with pretty graphics and more action-oriented combat and more solo-oriented things. Every single one of those games I have tried, I had more fun playing than the Quinfall. And I know that the Quinfall is an indie game. I know it's going to have a smaller budget, but holy shit. I didn't like this game at all. Finding positives actually became difficult. Finding negatives was too easy. But now let's at least talk about the positives and the negatives. The first positive is actually a pretty big one. The game works, like it actually runs. Once you can actually get in, it seems to run fine. The server issues appear to be all in their login server. Those issues continue to persist over a week from their launch, but at least it is functional. But once in game, I do want to stress that these systems work. They react, the combat reacts, the NPCs do things, the quests work, the itemization works. It all just works, which is something that can't be said for every game. The other thing that can't be said for every game is that visuals are pretty good. They've gone for a realistic look that doesn't have quite the same rendering fuzz of Unreal Engine, that is because it's made in Unity. Armor especially looks good, but I do want to give props to the visuals of things like these falling leaves. I don't know why that's so important to me, but it is. Perhaps making the world feel a bit more real. However, the lack of facial expression rigging for animations on many NPCs leads to a kind of weird uncanny valley. But hey, you know what? At least this jester is happy with their life, right?
I can't stop dancing. Why won't it stop? I just want to stop dancing. Why am I here? Save me! End my misery! Stop this! Stop it! Stop it!
Although the mouth rigging appears to at least show through, even for armor. It's very flexible armor. Don't ask me why the jester is in the middle of the village performing in a heap of grass. I think it's really because they can, which honestly describes much of the world design, because they can. Combat skills are responsive, though for a melee, the animations seem to kind of lock you in place, something you really notice in PvP especially. They use a chain system like that other games like Bless Online have used. It's an interesting system that gives this sense of action combat while firmly maintaining its roots in tab target, but the downside to these chaining systems is that they make for even less player agency. You just do the next thing in the chain because the game has told you that these are the optimal ways to use your skills. Oddly enough, a tab target MMO, Final Fantasy XIV Samurai, suffers from this to an extent, with this one combo piece leading to another combo piece. You are told by the game, do this, do skill 1, do skill 2, do skill 3, and that's essentially what the chaining system is. One thing I do want to give props to this game, especially because they have an in-game cosmetic shop, over a game like BDO is not something I really expected. Visual progression. The game has visual progression of armor. I have been very critical in the past of games like BDO because there's so little visual progression in your armor that you are deeply, deeply incentivized to go purchase cosmetics from the store. Each item seemed to have different visuals that I looted or new sparkle effects or something like that. And this next positive is kind of just repeating the first one, but I wanted to really hone in on it. The systems do actually work. More on how in a second, but the fact that they have managed to overlay things like building, crafting, animal taming, combat questing, etc. all in one game is unexpected. They're all at the most basic level. None of it is something really to write home about as being an exceptional iteration of those skills, and they've been done in other games before. But if they sold the game on having all these systems, actually having them deserves a positive. Their implementation and enjoyment, well, we'll talk about that in a sec when we get to the negatives. The last positive I want to talk about is that they actually have one of those systems, taming. Even if it's a mini game and it's kind of annoying and basic for how you tame, I like that it exists in the game. It's one of the things that games tend to shy away from or lock behind specific classes that I specifically loved in games like Star Wars Galaxies and Ultima Online. And for someone who does get deep into this game, getting to tame animals out in the wild and place them in your home is probably going to be pretty cool. Now, the fact that there'll be pet cosmetics probably goes a long way to making this a worthwhile system for them to implement. But hey, let's jump into the negatives, why don't we? And we're gonna start with the store. This game has an in-game store with cosmetics, bag space, experience buffs. Honestly, the best way I can describe this part is by the recording I made when I first started playing the game. When I looked through the store and found this. Okay, so scratch that about it being the actual recording as I was going through the store, because the audio of that recording was quite shit. I didn't level my audio correctly, and all you can hear is the sounds of the music in the game over my angst over the store. Basically, the store contains lots of different, tons and tons of cosmetics, from pet cosmetics to everything else, to experience boosts, to what's perhaps more of the concerning thing is inventory boosts and things like that. Not just inventory, but having an inventory slot boost as well as a inventory weight boost. So two ways to make you consider whether you want to actually buy extra ability to farm things. And as we see in the dungeon, by the time I was going through the dungeon, I was quickly running out of inventory space and I needed it. And that's with the addition of them giving me a free upgrade to my inventory space when I started the game. I think my biggest concern is that because they currently have this in-game store, they have this secondary market channel where they can grab a bunch of cash from whales, then kill the game in 6 months to a year. I hope that's not the case for people who are enjoying the game, but it is still a possibility. This is in part due to context around this game. The game was shrouded in mystery for a while. It kind of came out of nowhere. They still have no real public face. They have a Discord, but that's about it, and they've been very heavy-handed in that Discord. They made a game before under a different name and didn't disclose that early on. There's nothing tying this company to this game and stopping them from vanishing in a few months. So if you are playing, if you are considering spending money, please keep that in mind. Context of this game and its developer are very important for this negative. It doesn't mean that this is a red flag all across. It is the culmination of how this game has come to be and how this game has been marketed and not marketed over time. There's a lot of concern, so I would suggest just be a little extra cautious with this in-game store. If you can avoid spending any money on it, please avoid spending any money on it. At least, the very least, until the game actually releases. There also just happens to be this very real concern that it seems like they're essentially reselling, potentially, bought assets from the Unity store. I'm not saying that all these assets are bought assets, but this rabbit sure looks very, very familiar. And it's a little bit concerning that that's something they're doing. I don't personally have a problem with the game using Unity assets in their game. I do, however, have a problem with them buying the asset and then selling it to players in-game for real money. Hell, honestly, this may even violate Unity's terms of service about reselling Unity assets as themselves, if this is in fact just a resale of the said Unity asset. This is one of those things that I noticed more at the end of my review when I was doing the editing, when it looked oddly familiar, but this just seems, this alone would be enough reason to never play this game for me, in all honesty. The resale of these Unity assets, even if they have some kind of loophole where they're allowed to do it, is just a step too far. It's too much. It's kind of ridiculous, in all honesty. This is ridiculous. The next negative for me is going to be the use of AI in marketing materials and even in the game. It's like an AI thumbnail on YouTube for a game that doesn't exist, but done by the very company itself. To be completely fair, I didn't like the use of purely CGI trailers for decades with World of Warcraft either, because they're not remotely representative of the game itself, even if they're really fucking cool. This though, it's not even cool, it's just kind of lazy. They use AI in-game too for art, which contributes to this feeling of it being kind of soulless, or things that look like they took too many shortcuts. There may very well come a day when AI can be used as a tool to enhance game development, but I don't think we're there yet, even remotely so. Right now, the use of AI screams from the mountains to me that they're taking shortcuts. I don't like the AI voices in Ashes Creation or Core Punk, and I don't like the AI use here either. It just feels lazy. And lazy is also kind of how I would say their combat implementation. Combat itself is boring. It feels like BDO, but less intuitive, less fun, and less impactful. Now, I personally prefer tab target combat that is a bit more tactical. So take my understanding of combat with a grain of salt, like understand that context. But I can enjoy action combat. I can enjoy good action combat. I actually enjoyed the combat in Bless Online, for example. But this, it doesn't hit. Animations don't really feel like they have weight. They don't feel crunchy, and the range of abilities is at best kind of strange. What's worse, the animations appear to be tied to the camera as well, so you get this jerky movement like the game was made by Michael Bay. The chaining system reminds me of Bless Online, but also just not as crisp. When you're not meeting Bless Online standards for combat system, when that will be a major selling point for your target audience, woof. You gain various skills and you can kind of customize your character, but with how easy the game is, it just all kind of felt crap. A bad pseudo action combat style, which is basically just you holding down the mouse button. Like if you played Ashes of Creation, imagine if Ashes of Creation had less mobility, worse animations, and you didn't have the ability to toggle on auto attack, so you just had to hold down your mouse button. That's kind of what it felt like. Honestly, if you're looking for that type of combat, you're much better off even with a Throne and Liberty for a game like this, or BDO. And yes, I know that Throne and Liberty isn't actually action combat, but the combat felt better than this. Next negative is abundant fast travel, extremely fast leveling, and plentiful loot that made everything feel kind of useless. You get your mount extremely early, which shrinks the world, and then you get this ability to fast travel. You can fast travel with money, you can fast travel with your horse automatically. There's just all these different ways to not engage with the world, not to mention all the ways that you can go into the world with just your menus. In fact, this kind of dovetails with my next negative, the lack of a soul. The story doesn't make much sense. The quests are simple fetch quests, tutorial quests, kill quests, and the NPCs just kind of stand around or walk around aimlessly, with several looking the exact same. Now, that issue with the NPCs, it was an issue I had with Throne and Liberty too. It's a game design choice I don't really understand. Lack of enemy NPC routines feels lazy, as does the lack of NP diversity in those hunting areas. It's all just kind of the same. It is this this little spot of the same types of NPCs that are all the same level that you go and fight because that's what you do at that point, and it's just a grind spot. That's it. It's only there to grind. It has no purpose within the world. There's no thought to why should this exist here. For non-combat NPCs, many of them do actually at least have routines, but they mostly share the same few text lines over and over. The world itself generally feels very gamified. In this way, it's like Throne and Liberty, but worse. The best way to describe this is a game design that begins with how do we give players something to grind and quest and level up on, before what should exist in the world here? Why is this part of this world? I found myself not giving a shit about any NPCs, any locales, or any enemies. I didn't even care about my own character. Within just moments of opening the game, I had a sword with lightning effects, and I got that sword by fast traveling to a city and talking to someone. In the game, I felt like I did absolutely nothing to earn anything I got except existing in the game and paying the $20 to get in. The next thing we need to talk about, though, is the number one reason why so many people have been negative about this game. And while yes, players have been able to play it, I was able to play, and yes, this is an early access game, there's some important context here. This game is running off a very small population. This game is really peaking around 4,000, 5,000 players across 6 total servers across various regions, and they're still struggling. And they're doing so in a game that is in early access, but that they have said is going to launch in 6 months. At this point, less than 6 months before launch. It's supposed to launch in 2025 as a fully released 1.0 game per the devs themselves. Even after they made multiple fixes, including, adding new servers, I routinely had issues logging into the game. An actual in-game performance, well, performance-wise, it ran fine for me once in-game, but when I looked at the usage, I noticed it was using up almost all of my 32 gigs of memory, and it was pushing my 4070 Ti to some really high usage. To be fair, recording in OBS itself is a resource hog as well, but it was running at less than 2% of my CPU compared to 30% for the Quinfall, and 2,600 MB compared to 6,270 MB for the Quinfall. And all this performance was taken when simply just standing completely still in game. But like I said, the game did run for me and I experienced no real lag. However, I did get lots of disconnects, like this one when I was trying to enter a dungeon, or this one when trying to log back in. That gets worse when you think of what they're trying to accomplish. Logging in, I was number 340 in a queue for one of the European servers. They now have 6 servers, and at that time I was trying to log in, there was a grand total of just under 5,000 players in game. The idea that the server cannot handle an average of less than 1,000 players across its game servers and must resort to queues when it's planning on launching in 6 months per their own Steam page should be a concern for anyone. Oh, and that queue, well, it took several hours, roughly 3 hours. And this was taken on Saturday, February 1st, when there was that queue. This game does not feel like they did the necessary work on the back end. The part of all the stuff that they need to do first before putting in all the flashy things. And the thing is, when in game, I rarely saw many players anywhere either. I might as well, in many times, just been playing a solo game. Now, normally with number 1, this being an indie title, and number 2, an early access title, I wouldn't knock them for this. But it shows me a lack of work. They aren't slammed with players, and these issues have persisted for days, for over a week. The game went into EA on the 24th of January. I was still having login server issues on queues on the 1st of February. And just one final negative to just tie that all up into a knot is it has the kind of things that you'd normally expect with the manufactured engagement mechanics, like, hey, if you log in every single day, we'll give you shiny new items. That kind of shit is always going to be a red flag to me, because if your game is good, why are you trying to pay me and bribe me to log in? Why do you need to bribe me to play your game? Why isn't the game just good enough that I want to log in every day? It's not a reward, it's not a thank you, it's a bribe, and it will always be a bribe. And it's to increase their average concurrent players because they can say that many people logged in that day. I will die on that hill. Daily quests and login bonuses are bullshit mechanics. They don't belong in games. Quinfall feels to me like all the pieces of a Unity store thrown into a game with little back-end work done to make it an MMO. It's a game where I worry in 6 months to a year it will disappear once they've made enough money from their in-game cash store and non-refunded copies. It is not the day before. It is a functional game. It is a game where I'm sure some people will be able to have some fun. But I personally found little to no joy in it. Playing it, quite honestly, felt like a chore. This may very well be the MMO that I have played since starting this channel that I have had the least amount of fun in. And I don't actually take joy in saying that. I wanted to be wrong about this game because we need new MMOs. And perhaps someone is having a fantastic time. I've seen streams where people are enjoying themselves. But for me, this was awful. So would I recommend it? I know it's gonna be shocking. I know this is gonna be terribly shocking, but no, I wouldn't. I would not recommend this game. It's just about everything I don't personally like in MMOs, from overloaded, bloated systems to a dull world that lacks engagement, as well as abundant solo play. What seems to be a lack of balance between ranged and melee, random cosmetics, and things that seem to just like exist for the sake of existing. For games that have similarities to this one, combat, solo play, all the systems, I'd recommend Throne and Liberty, hell, BDO, or any number of games like this over the Quinfall. For people who want a more social focused MMO, avoid it completely. The game will attract players through its visuals and what looks to be action combat. And I feel for those players who are wanting a good game in that vein. And for those players, I hope the games coming later this year and beyond are much more substantial for that. Like Chrono Odyssey, Aeon 2, or even ArcAge Chronicles in the future. Skip this one and put your $20 to something more satisfying. I'm uninstalling it right now.